I'm Christy Bilbrey. After working in a Senate press office, the White House, and corporate, I decided to start my own business and quickly realized that one thing I never learned in those was how to market myself. Thankfully, I discovered brand storytelling and combined that with PR and marketing strategy made it so much easier for me to connect with others, promote my services, and grow my brand. I created the Business That Story Built podcast to help business leaders learn how to do the same. Ready? Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining today. We are back in the personal brand series, and I'm really excited to share with you something that I know a lot of people think of when they think about PR, which is media relations. And today we have a really great guest who is going to help us focus on how we can do a better job personalizing those opportunities that we have with the media to really maximize them and connect with new audiences. So let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. We have Vanessa Morcom. She is a millennial mom of 3 and founder of Morcom Media, a performance PR shop for thought leaders. She has a degree and background in journalism, works at Canada's largest social enterprise, and is a contributor at Medium, writing about women in business. She's been awarded Best of Canada for PR, been named a Woman to Watch in PR, launched a pop-up for women artisans with the help of Good Housekeeping magazine, Mall of America, and Amazon Fashion, and she's hosted travel writers from National Geographic, Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast Travel, and AFAR, or AFAR, how do you pronounce that?
Afar.
Yeah. Rural India and Ecuador. So her work is far-reaching. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining. Welcome to the podcast.
Christy, thank you, my friend. It is an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here with you today.
Absolutely. This is going to be a ton of fun. So Vanessa has done a ton with the media. She does a lot with personalizing brands, things that I'm really excited for us to dive into today. But before we do, I just want you to share a little bit about your background. Like, how did you, I don't even think I know this. What made you decide to get into PR, and share a little bit about the cool places that you worked before you even started your business?
Absolutely. So like any good story, it all happened by accident. I was studying journalism in Montreal, and a friend of mine asked me to do a PR event for her dad's footwear company, and they had signed on the rights to sell Paris Hilton's shoe collection. And, you know, I went to journalism school so that I could report from the front lines, this, very minded in the sense of wanting to, tell the unbiased story and to report the hard facts. And, that for me was the pinnacle of a career. And so when this friend approached me to, handle, a celebrity press appearance, I just thought this couldn't be like further than my worst nightmare. I'm not into celebrity entertainment, gossip magazines, and so, but I am kind and I am Canadian. And so I said, I'd be happy to help you out. So, gosh, I must have been 21 years old, early 20s, let's just say early 20s at the time. And I was put in touch with Paris Hilton's PR team. They gave me the entire rollout. They gave me a press release, and they said, just make sure everyone in town knows that she's coming. And at that time, so I guess that would have been almost 16 years ago. At that time, we were still faxing press releases to newsrooms and using the phone. And I love the phone, like gone are the days of the phone, but that's like my power play, is like getting on the phone, like an actual phone call. I miss that. Anyhow, we ended up pushing the news out to all of our local outlets. It became a national story overnight, and St. Catherine Street, it's renowned in Montreal. We had to close it down. Police,
wow,
tens of thousands of fans coming out for autographs. And, working with Paris was incredible. She showed me kind of what it meant to be a businesswoman and to have multiple brands. And I had a very different perception pre-working with her, and then having the opportunity to sit beside her and brief her and run her through, the program that day. And it was a lot of fun, Christy. Like, I just thought, man, I think I could make something of this, and so from that one event, I started my own PR company out of Montreal. And because of the success of that Paris event, whenever celebs would come to town for product launches or press junkets or just visiting town, I would get the call to handle their media relations as like a celebrity wrangler. And that's where it started.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Such a wild story. I love that. Well, and yeah, so that I think that's so interesting, given what we're talking about today, and how you said you had this perception of who she was, what she was like before you met her, and that the way that she showed up for that really kind of shifted the way that you perceived her. So we do know there's so much power in not just getting press, but the way that you show up in that. So I think that's important. I mean, just kind of starting out this conversation with, why should someone focus not only on getting media, but really on how they personalize it?
Yeah. So I think what we're talking about is about brand and differentiation, right? And so it's looking, before we can go out to the media with all of our different ideas and stories and, let me backtrack. You need a brand before you can go out in public. It's going to be really hard to go out in public without the foundation of a brand. So by knowing authentically who you are in that DNA, both written and also visual, this language, doing that upfront work to differentiate yourself, because it kind of is a sea of sameness out there,
right,
as thought leaders or as women in business. How are we going to differentiate ourselves in order to get the attention of Glamour magazine or Thought Leadership piece in Inc? We need to differentiate ourselves with how we present ourselves to the world. And that comes with having to do some discovery around the brand that we want to be. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit, of how we do that discovery and why it's so important to do that before we go out to the press.
Yes. So where is the best place to get started? If someone's like, I want to do this right, what do I really need to ask myself, or maybe, shift about my brand to make it so that I can take advantage of this way? Like, where's that starting point?
Yeah. So usually, how I would kick off with a new client, a female founder, let's say, for example, we do a brand strategy questionnaire so I can get really clear on vision, mission, who the competitors are, audience, price points. Is it services? Is it products? E-com? What is the sort of environment, the scope? Is it national, regional, local? So it just gives me a bit of an idea of what we're playing with in terms of a strategy, brand strategy questionnaire. That would be the first step. Once we get through that exercise, then we go on to sort of, here's my trade secret. Define a brand archetype. And this is what gives the brand its personality.
Yes. So share a little bit about what exactly is a brand archetype, and maybe a few examples just so people have a little bit of an idea, and how does that work with, well, let's just start with that.
Okay. There's a lot of literature that exists online and at the library. I still go to the library. Do you? I love books in hard form. I have I'm not a tablet reader. Anyways, brand archetypes. So there are 12, and the stream comes from psychoanalysis, from Carl Jung. And what brand archetypes are is that they form connection with an audience. So I'll give you an example. Like a couple of the archetypes are magician. There's the magician archetype. There's the hero. There's the lover. And they all have attributes and qualities about them that they will speak. Those archetypes will speak to an audience's subconscious. So they're universally recognized, which is incredible because that breaks barriers in language, in like any of these cultural like barriers that we have. Archetypes are going to break those boundaries because they're recognized by a public's subconscious. So I like to use those to embed that into any kind of brand strategy, any of these archetypes, because it gives a layer of personality that's recognizable without without language and without visuals. It's about personality. Yeah.
Right. I love that. As someone is going through that, once they can identify their archetype, how do you recommend starting to use that and implement that into your brand?
Right. So, okay, so like let's give an example of the archetype that's the lover. Okay, so that would be like known brands in the world would be like Chanel or like Victoria's Secret. They are the lover archetype. So the personality or the aura around that brand is very sensual, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's like a soothing, there's an emphatic kind of feeling of how that brand shows up in how they speak, how they look, how their fonts and logos are designed. It is like really at the threshold of the personality of this brand in the world. So when I'm putting together a brand strategy for a client, like a female executive, for example, and we identify a brand archetype for them, that sort of model will be built into key messaging. So how they speak on camera, how they dress, so how they're styled, the type of partnerships that they will take on, whether that's retail or philanthropic endeavors. It all needs to tie back to the personality of that archetype. And so it lends as a kind of measuring stick. If you're wondering about like, is this going to be a great like brand fit for us? Well, let's go back to the archetype and let's ask that profile whether or not they would be symbiotic with that type of relationship. You know, it could even be a press outlet is not on brand for the lover persona, right? And I'll give you an example for that. You know, any of your beauty and fashion and women's lifestyle publications will be a great fit for the lover.
Sure.
A geeky tech pub, you know, is probably not the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, it lends to a lot of creativity. It lends to a lot of guidelines in terms of like how you maneuver in the world, but also how you show up too. And there's 12 of them, you know, so you don't have to be just one archetype. You could be a mix of two. Like you could be a sage and also a magician at the same time. But it also, like, I'll tell you this as well, it's beneficial for the brand, obviously, because it creates connection with audience. Mm-hmm. But it also really helps me get to the soul of the client in terms of the soulfulness of what it is that they want to achieve as a brand. They're putting a lot of dollars against PR. So I need to make sure that I really get to the core of what that desire of what they want to do in the world, and something that's bigger than just like selling products or pushing a service. What is like the why behind all of these, you know, money-making ideas?
Well, when we spoke the last time, you were giving me an example of a new company in New York that you're working with. So, I mean, definitely you can feel free to share an example, whether it's them or or someone else, kind of like how this plays out in real time?
So very excited, have signed on a new, there are new lingerie, intimates, luxury lingerie and intimates company that's founded by two women. Both of them are of Filipina descent. So just like really beautiful, traditional, and they have this like vibe, this like aura of sensuality about them as well. But we needed to go through the processing and the steps of like the brand before we can really, begin the work of developing press materials or a strategy or how we were going to photograph the next collection and campaign. So we did these exact same steps. We do a discovery through a questionnaire, and we get like into what this brand mission and values and what's at the heart of this and what is it that we're wanting to communicate outwards. In the discovery, we found that the archetypes were two. It was the sage, which is all about wisdom, authenticity, teaching. And it was also the lover, which is sensuality, which is a soothing like feeling. And so, when you're selling lingerie, you come up against, a lot of cultural barriers in terms of, the male gaze and around like women and bodies being objectified. And like, as a brand, we want to, now that we know these archetypes, now that we know the brand strategy, we want to position it as a company that has deep traditional roots back to South Asia. We want to position it as a company that is modern. It's run out of New York City. It's sustainable. Manufacturing happens within the garment district in Manhattan using like ultra luxury lace and silks and materials from Europe. So there's a lot of thought that goes into like who they are going out to announce. So my job is to announce two new collections that are going to market for holiday. But this is the pre-work that we would do so that we can understand how to speak to the customer, in a way that's also true and authentic to the founders and the brand itself at its core.
Yeah, I like that. And so when you're talking about getting them ready to announce these two collections for holidays, for people who maybe don't have a lot of experience with media, what is needed to be media ready? And I know that can depend on what type of media and what you're doing, but just in a very kind of foundational level, what are pieces that are kind of a go-to that they should prepare?
Yeah. So you definitely want to make sure that you've got strong visuals, and a very strong website with strong copy that's all on brand. Everything needs to be consistent. So for the holiday collection, the mandate is to go in and also build all of the press assets that we would need to go to media with. So that involves a photo shoot of the new collection. That also involves hiring the right art directors, stylists, photographers, hair and makeup, location. So there's a lot of pieces involved in, what the deliverable is like one electronic media kit.
Right.
But pieces that go into that are like 50 people deep, creative and ideas and photo shoots and samples and garments, being tried on real sized women, and doing behind the scenes B-roll so that you can pitch that out to press as well, to the Vogue Philippines and to any of the women's publications that do like diaries, on-set diaries of fashion shoots and things like this. And you also want to make sure that you're building the right team for these types of projects as well, So being media ready, you want to have a very strong website so that you can actually purchase when media happens. You need to be able to close the sale on site if it's an e-com brand like they are. You want to be able to have a strong press kit. So that's like company bio, founders' bios, headshots, fact sheets, press release, and then all the campaign photography. So that would be like stills of the actual garments, and then also lifestyle imagery. What's the concept and the look and feel of the holiday campaign? And so I will work with a lot of different creatives in New York to come up with the campaign idea and help them execute it and put them in touch with the right people so that it comes to fruition. So it can they go to market to sell this new collection in November.
And just to back up a little bit, when we're talking about being media ready, if we were to translate that to a thought leader or a B2B company, are there any differences to that kind of press kit or what it means to be press ready for that type of business?
Mm-hmm. So I think the same kind of guidelines are transferable. You want to make sure that you have a great press kit, super visuals in terms of your headshots, as well as a well-written bio, talking points, and then some media training, I think is really important. And there's a lot of different ideas of how media training needs to be done. I take clients through a very boring and long, open-ended question, like rehearsal. So basically, like the questions you sent me in preparation for this podcast, I would go through that like a dozen times with a client over and over and over, practicing the answers over and over and over again. It's just about practice and nailing, key messaging and talking points. But I think that that's pretty like transferable in terms of having talking points and visuals on
right.
B2C and B2B side. Yeah.
And the website ready and just the different pieces. And maybe even dependent on the business, those email campaigns ready, if you're drawing people in on the website, then.
Absolutely. And if you can, remember to bring in some insights and some statistics, like so great, like you have some very advanced, like executive thought leaders that are really about that. And then there would be an approach, that would require, knowing government policy and coming to the table with research and references and, talking points that are a little bit more serious and like quotable, because you don't have, like in terms of a press release, you don't know what is going to be picked up in the interview. If it's a phoner, they're going to take whatever is going to fit in their article. Sure. So you need to make sure that that you're supporting your cause, essentially, in anything that you say on record.
Right. I think the important thing also is just, this isn't something that can just be cranked out in, overnight. Like, I love the way you're breaking down the thought behind it and the practice. And like, this isn't something that's just get this out there. If you want it to really have the impact and, like you said, help you differentiate yourself when you do go to market. Otherwise, it's kind of like there's not a whole lot of point. I mean, yes, you'll get some links for SEO, but in terms of really getting in front of your audience in a memorable way, I love the way that you're describing it. And something else that you touched on is, certain things dependent on your brand, certain outlets are going to make sense, and others that maybe you thought, oh, well, this is a big outlet, they don't make sense for your brand or where your audience is. So when it comes to developing a media list, what are your recommendations for that, for the best way to go about that?
So I don't know if this is just like an old school, like an OG PR approach, but I like to build lists for campaigns that are more like quality over quantity. The landscape today, like the press landscape, is shrinking. A lot of journalists, especially friendlies, they're moving over to the comms and marketing side of of the business. So it's really important that the pitch, that the outlet, that the list that's being created is on brand, is on target. The whole objective of getting, a headline out into the world is that it's meeting the right person, the right place at the right time. And if you're not doing those three things at the same time, you're going to miss your target. Yes. So, you look at your campaign, like, for example, we'll take the lingerie company. Holiday is their season. That's the seasonality of that campaign. My media list would be focused on gift guides, holiday gift guides.
Okay.
Right? Listicles, reviews, and holiday gift guides. That's where we focus any of the outreach for outbound press relations.
Yeah. So I think that's true. A lot of people just think, what are the biggest outlets? That's where I want to be. So it's really kind of going back to your brand, your customers, your approach, and making sure those outlets are in line with who you are. So I like that. And then when it comes to developing relationships with journalists, some people are like, I want to be a part of that. Then maybe top do's and don'ts. Because I think there's a lot of things people think are really helpful that they're doing that aren't. So what are your tips for kind of do's and don'ts?
Yeah. So I would love to say to a client that I have really strong media relations because I've been doing this, for some time. But the turnover is so quick and so frequent that my media list is not the same as it was 6 months ago, because there's so much movement happening in the media. And that also lends to some different strategies, right? Like us, going out to use influencers or newsletters or LinkedIn as a platform. We're having to get super creative on what that KPI is from an earned perspective. And when I say around performance PR, it's just a fancy word for paid and earned in a strategy together, because a lot of the press today, it does require a paid approach, especially for product reviews and any kind of opinion, thought leadership, articles that are going out in ink or, there is a paid element to it that's just that is a blurred line that now PR, that used to be a strictly marketing tactic. Right. Now, PR is, that falls under my roof a lot, is having to manage paid and earned outreach. Yeah. And I know you said there's such a quick turnover, but there's kind of newer strategies today to that. Yeah. So with regards to relationships, you need to meet a journalist where they are. So I'm also a contributing writer. And so I get a lot of pitches from publicists, and they are awful. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. They're not in line with of topical relevance. They obviously haven't researched who I talk to and in what industries or sectors. I talk to women that are in multiple sectors, but they're all in business and they're all women. So I get pitched, products. I get pitched, things that are completely not my beat, and that goes into the trash. It just goes automatically into the trash. So when building relationships with media, have a genuine brain, and what that means is how you form that relationship is that their beat. You read their newsletter, you follow them on social, you interact, you can go to them with a pitch, an educated pitch that is genuine, sincere, that is backed by fact, because how they write, what their style is, that they're going to be getting ready for holiday this time of year. So you can actually ask the question, not just send blanketed mass pitches to press. It's so annoying.
Yes.
You get really specific and you say, what are you covering for holiday? I know it's that time of year. I've read your columns in the past. They're fantastic. Here's an example of one in particular that I loved. I could see a fit for XYZ. And keep it short also. Like these long pitches. I mean, like I don't have time to read that. Grab my attention in the headline, in the subject headline, and then write me a little something that you know who I am, you know how I write, and you might get an answer back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so good. I think so long gone are the days of these mass pitches doing anything worthwhile. Even, as a podcaster, I get pitched to a lot of people that I think this has absolutely nothing to do with what I talk about on my show. And so again, yeah, you're exactly right. It's just immediately to the trash because clearly they don't care. So why should I is kind of the way. And I feel like journalists, same thing. They have all these crazy timelines because like you said, there are fewer of them. There's more work that they have to do. And I think when you look at them as a human being who's under the gun and just thinking, what do I have that would actually help them? I think that is a big shift instead of just how can they help me? It's what do I have that can help them? And I think that's where they can start to see, okay, this person gets me, this person is actually helpful. But you're right, like it has to be short. If it's super long, it's like, oh my gosh, overwhelm.
And also, like, if I don't hear back after my second follow-up, and I'll say that this is the last time I'm following up, I got the clue that this is not something you're interested in. But I will just send one last reminder in case this missed your eyes because I know you're so busy, But I'm not a hound. Like, I'm not going to follow up and get phone numbers and stalk them on social. And like, it's crazy. Like, I don't think that's necessary. If you have something strong, you have a strong brand, you have a relevant, timely pitch, it's probably like you got a 50% chance. And that's better than zero.
Right. But some follow-up is necessary because like you said, I mean, they are just so bombarded that it's okay to send a couple follow-ups. Like that's not bad. Yeah.
Well, I think too, like how busy we can get. And I'm thankful that person followed. Oh, thank gosh. I wanted to follow up with that, but they did that, and the timing was like serendipitous. There's a little bit of magic that's needed in PR too, Christy.
Yeah.
A little bit of luck in time,
There is so many people think, oh, well, you just, this is your job. You just put in the call. It's like, no, you don't know exactly where they're at. And maybe they just covered it, or maybe their colleague is covering it, or, it's so much has to work out perfectly. So, yeah. How, and I'm not sure I'm going to ask this question the right way. So you may have to help me on this. But some cases, like some of the pieces that you work on, where someone's given the questions in advance that they're going to answer, what is a better approach to maybe think differently about not just answering the question with, you're asking a question, here's a fact that will answer your question, but what is a better shift of mindset to think about how can I really portray my brand the best way in answering it? Not just here's the answer, but here's an answer that will also speak to my brand and why we're unique.
So this is what makes a thought leader a thought leader. Because, you can go forward and be an excellent public speaker and an excellent interviewer and have the facts. But if you can't draw on some kind of personal anecdote, experience, flaw, mess, authenticity in your delivery, you're just going to be like the rest of them.
Yeah. That's the hard truth. Yeah. So I guess it's really kind of comes down to stories that you can share from your experience that are going to really help with that. Whether it's something that happened to you or just something that impacted you, instead of just saying, here's what someone should do. It's like that why piece. Why? Well, here's what happened to me. Let me share that. So,
yeah. And, I think, so, you had also sent me some questions for the podcast, and I had a completely different set of answers, a week ago than I do today. And I think that's another, skill that's worthwhile working on in the communication space, which is how to answer. It's a bit of improv. It's a bit of theater. but it's how to answer questions like a what do they call that? Like quick, like a polo pony on the heels of a polo pony. You want to be able to answer something quickly with a little bit of pizzazz and charisma, and the only way that you get doing this is by practicing over and over again, taking like the big opportunities, the not so big opportunities. Like I know too, in terms of like brand relevance and wanting to make sure your alignment is accurate. When you're just starting out, the more I say, like get the exposure, get the experience, make the mistakes before you're sitting, on a red carpet at the Emmys. And, you've had a lot of like pre-time, like pre-game practice, and you can do that with your family. You do that with your pets. You do that with your publicist, your therapist,
True.
But just practice answering questions and also asking them, I think, is probably, something that we talk a lot about, like how to answer questions from a journalist. Yeah, but what about being an excellent question, like being put in the shoes of that journalist? How do you ask as open-ended questions? How do you really show someone that you're listening?
That's such a good point, because it's like anything in life. If you can get inside the head of the other person, you are going to be able to find ways to connect and more strongly. That makes perfect sense. So yeah, I like that.
No. But wait, that is not my advice to say that you go on CNN and, start interviewing an anchor.
But you do it before that.
Yeah.
And okay, so let's say they've done this pre-work, they're media ready, they've been practicing, they get this opportunity. What is your PR advice on how they can maximize that piece of media that they just got?
There are a lot of channels that content can live on, or that it can be cut or repurposed. And you need to do that in order to maximize the opportunity, right? So let's say with holiday gift guides, for instance, you want to make sure that gets on socials. You want to make sure that's in Reels. You want to make sure those Reels are pinned. You want to make sure it gets in a newsletter. You can also use those press ops to pitch additional stories, right? So let's say that there's coverage in a gift guide like the Good Housekeeping, and you reach out to Women's Day. Hey, we just had a great write-up in your sister publication. Here it is. Would you be interested in something for Valentine's Day? Because you've missed that news cycle, right? You're going to go on to the next seasonable time frame, right? But you can use that coverage as you can put in your email signature. If it's a real like tier A, like maximize it. And make sure that grandma and grandpa get a copy, I think.
Yes.
That's the most important one, right?
That's right. That's right. Do you have any final tips that we haven't covered that you recommend people do to really personalize their brand in the media?
I think developing a practice of self-awareness, whether that's like meditation, therapy, cooking Sunday night dinners for the family, but that type of reflective work that you can do knowing yourself is going to help you be like the best version of you in the media landscape. If you're burnt out, you don't know who you are, you're grumpy and cranky and tired, it's going to show under the camera lights,
right?
So I think probably it would just be like, take really good care of yourself, make sure you visit nature, do the hard work at home in closed walls, around your mental health and around your physical well-being, so that you can show up like not just as a shell, but as like showing the character, the personality, and the charisma from inside, And I think that's really the winning equation, right? Is like when we see people showing up, even if they say things we don't like, but we see them showing up as who they really are, we've got some kind of like connection with that person, or we're going to remember them or something that they said, you know? So work hard at who you are, I think, of developing that inner strength, that inner core of who you are, and then let it by osmosis trickle into the brand, to the business, and then onto the stage.
That's so good, because I also think when you are really passionate about what you're speaking about and excited, that can cover up for areas where maybe you're still a little green and don't have the practice, because people connect with someone who's really interested and excited in what they're speaking to. But you're right. Even if you do all the practicing in the world and you think, I have these questions nailed, I'm ready, but you're burned out, you're fried, you're sick of what you're saying. And then you wonder why it didn't connect, it didn't land the way that you hoped. You're right. It has to be both. Yes, you need to know yourself. You need to know your brand. But if you're not out there kind of in touch with what you're talking about, who you are, what you represent, it has to be both to really land. So I'm glad that you said that. That's such a kind of like the soft skills side of what makes something great in the media and with audiences.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of like magic sauce for thought leadership. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Vanessa, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. Where can people go to find out more about you and connect with you?
So you can always send me a direct email at Vanessa, Vanessa, at morcom.media. And that is also the URL of my site, morcom.media. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I've got public profiles. I'm always taking calls. But yeah, and accessible, especially for female founders. That's really important to me, to speak to anybody that, thinks that PR is out of their price range. Give me a shout, and I'm happy to lend some of the mess and the mistakes in the making so that you don't have to repeat that.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, this is The Business That's Storybuilt. To succeed in business, your prospects need to know, like, and trust you. To achieve that, you need visibility. Podcasts offer something that other channels don't: attention. More than 80% of listeners listen to the entire episode, and more than 50% consider buying from brands they discover there. Starting your own podcast can bring in a pipeline of leads and strengthen your brand for years to come. To find out if this is right for you, email hello@christybilbrey.com.